Hi, my name is Andrew Tucker. I was hired in August of 2004 by General Electric, currently Momentum Performance Materials, at 216 Hudson River Road, Waterford, New York. This is right outside Albany, New York, which is the capital of New York State. During my initial interview with the company's human resource representative, I presented a resume listing my long extensive employment history. I also explained that I was a recovering addict, that I had been incarcerated in both state and federal prison. I explained that upon my release from incarceration, I made a conscious decision not to return to New York. Thus, I voluntarily enrolled myself in an addiction recovery program in Albany, New York, that is a Christian-based fellowship run by Father Young. At that time, I was clean and sober and gainfully employed for approximately 8 years. Upon my second interview with plant management, I distinctly remember being asked by one of the plant managers, quote, "How would you react to racism on the job?" I replied, "My view of racism is that no one is born that way. It's my view that racism is a learned behavior." I reported to work at Building 37. I went to the locker room, I picked out an available locker and wrote my name on it. I wrote Andrew Tucker, A shift. The next day, my locker was defaced. Someone had changed my last name from Tucker to profanity, fucker. I initially wrote this off as a childish prank. I continued to work hard and perform diligently, and I always had a good work performance evaluation. My work was impeccable. But I began to notice routinely and continuously racist acts in the form of someone drawing the circular crosshairs of an assassin's rifle scope over the face of prominent African American politicians, actors, children, etc., as they appeared in a daily newspaper presented in the employees' break room at Building 37. At this time, I was the only black male in the building. I suffered grief and intolerable amount of mental anguish. So I approached one of my coworkers, the only other African American female working in Building 37 at the time. I asked her, "What is going on with the defacement of blacks in the newspaper?" She explained that this had been going on for a long time and that she had previously reported and filed a complaint with Human Resources. At this time, she was a 13-year experienced worker and her credibility is impeccable. She explained that Human Resource Department did an initial investigation, but due to plausible deniability, everyone keeping quiet, all the senior workers not willing to snitch on anyone doing this. This initial investigation was done before I was even hired. It is reasonable to assume that if a formal complaint was filed by a minority employee showing that the daily newspapers in the break room of Building 37 were being used as an instrument to display racism, sexism, or even anti-Semitism, then at the very least, management should have been making an attempt to monitor, review such instruments, or at least ban the newspapers from the job site or break room. Because of a lack of action taken in the previous complaint by a minority employee was lacking, I rationalized that had I filed an identical complaint with Human Resources, the outcome would have been the same without viable evidence. So I proceeded to collect viable evidence. I collected video evidence, physical evidence, and eyewitness testimony. I rationalized that rather than go to middle management with the evidence, I would go directly to the head of the company. But unfortunately, the mental anguish and torment that I continued to suffer as a result of the racism on the job became the single contributing factor in my relapse into drug addiction. I tested positive for marijuana on 3 occasions. I also tested negative in between the positive tests. This allowed me to return to work after an early suspension. The negative test gave me a sense that I would be able to maintain my sobriety through willpower, as I did remain clean and sober for 8 years prior to being hired. I signed a last chance agreement and took civil service exams for jobs paying half the amount that I was currently making, because I knew that once I told Human Resources, I would not be able to return to work. There's no way they would be able to guarantee my safety in such a volatile workplace. I've been working approximately for 1.5 years in Building 37. I gained the trust of most of the workers I've worked with and most of the senior workers there. In my heart, I believe they are not racist. Nevertheless, there's a big difference between being racist and racially insensitive. I realized that once this came to fruition, I would put everybody, even the good-minded people, in a position where they would have to choose a side. They would have to admit or deny that they saw on occasion what was racially discriminating. At one point, nigger was written on my locker, and at one point I was told I'd be shot. These are not children. These are grown men, and these are highly skilled and intelligent men, and these insidious bigotry and racial acts were calculated. They also would brag and boast about their hunting exploits, and they were avid hunters who could easily pick a deer off from 200 yards. So once I let the cat out the bag, I was not coming back to work the next day. There's no way the company could guarantee my safety in such a volatile environment. When I finally sat down with a representative from Human Resources and my two union representatives, two distinguished, well-respected employees with a long-term history with the company, I explained to the Human Resource representative that the single contributing factor to my relapse in the drug use of a very minimal use of marijuana was due to the mental anguish caused by the insidious overt racism I was experiencing in Building 37. I showed him the video evidence. He agreed that this was unacceptable. He later conducted a personal investigation on his own, going over to Building 37, looking through the papers when I was not even working. We had a second meeting with him. It was me, him, and the two union representatives. He looked at me and he said, I went over there, did my own investigation, and I saw exactly what you were talking about, Andrew. So I looked at him and I asked him, was it racial in nature? He remained silent. I looked over at my two union representatives. I asked him a second time, was what you saw racial in nature? He again remained silent. His silence spoke volumes and is further proof that my suspicions were correct in assuming that the on-site management would rather fire a good employee like myself and protect and suppress and not deal with an in-depth, long investigation revealing the identities of the racist bigots in 37. My two union representatives worked hard and diligently and were able to secure an arbitration on my behalf with the company. Unfortunately, the company would only agree to arbitrate with the stipulation that I would not be allowed to bring up or discuss the mental anguish I suffered due to the racism that led to my relapse. Two union representatives worked hard and diligently and were able to secure an arbitration on my behalf with the company. Unfortunately, the company would only agree to arbitrate with the stipulation that I would not be allowed to bring up or discuss the mental anguish I suffered due to the racism that led to my relapse. When I tried, the attorney for the company objected, called a sidebar with the arbitrator, and the testimony again was not allowed to be presented. This further supports my suspicions that the company, rather than dealing with the racial issue, would rather suppress it. After leaving my final meeting with Human Resources at the company, I proceeded to contact the State of New York Office of the Attorney General, Human Civil Rights Bureau. They sent me a letter saying they do not do this kind of stuff on an individual basis. Rather, they investigate patterns of discrimination. In my opinion, this is a pattern of discrimination because it has been occurring for a long time, and many of the black employees chose to be silent or docile about it because they had a good job and didn't want to lose it. There's currently a case with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. There's an ongoing investigation, but I feel that they are short-handed and do not have the funding to proceed vigorously with this case. At this point, I leave an open invitation to Andrew Cuomo's office to contact me. I'm not trying to embarrass his office. I like his father. I thought his father would have made a great president. I leave an open invitation to the current CEOs of Momentum Performance Material and the CEO of General Electric. I would like to say that what happened to me does not reflect the proud Americans that live in the capital region of New York State. I also leave an open invitation to any prominent attorney that would wish to represent me in this case. Please email me. God bless America.